So to start off here, we have a tabletop display here. We're going to go over the flashing detail. Now, when doing the flashing, ThermaTru always recommends using a sill pan. ThermaTru does offer a pre-formed sill pan like this one here. It's 3 separate pieces that get glued together, okay? And we'll show you how that goes. As far as the sill pan goes, this is a great product. Any sill pan is fine, doesn't have to specifically be this one. This is one that ThermaTru offers, so if you're buying the ThermaTru door and you want a sill pan to go along with it, this would be a great product to get. In some cases, you don't have the option of a sill pan. We do suggest that in those situations that you do some kind of flashing system on the sill. So we're gonna go over that first as far as the flashing system, what that looks like. So we use the OSI flashing tape, okay? That comes in different sizes, 6-inch, 4-inch, depending on what you need and what your wall size is. Bob's gonna show you just exactly how that goes on. So as you can see, first thing you wanna do here, now we have different flashing systems. Some are actually, they do spread and they expand, so you don't have to add any additional pieces to the corners. All right, in this case, this is not one that expands, so we would have to make sure that those corners are sealed tight. Be careful, on that one there. So what Bob's doing now is he's applying the sill. This is again to protect the sill, make it watertight. You want it to go up at least 6 to 8 inches on each side and make sure the entire sill is sealed. Again, this is a 4-inch. Typically, you can use a 6-inch, which would actually wrap down in front of the face of the windowsill here, the door sill. Now again, this is what we call the barrier method. So there's a barrier method and a drainage method. The barrier is basically taking the sill that you have and completely sealing that door jamb to the subfloor. Okay, what that means is you're wrapping with the flashing tape, and then you're caulking that sill completely down to the subfloor. That's not going to allow any water in or out. Okay, that's the barrier method. The sill pan, which is the drainage method, what this does, again, it seals that sill, but allows any water that may get around the perimeter of that door to get onto that sill pan and actually drain outward. So you're not getting that water into the house, okay? So this would be the drainage. Want to just put the other piece on the outside? So as you can see, this corner here is sealed. Now this one, because it's not the right size, typically what you want to do is double it up just to make sure that that's completely wrapped. Right there. Make a small cut there. That folds around it and down. So now this doesn't allow any water to get on that subfloor and start to deteriorate and rot away. Now, in this situation, what you want to do now is you want to use some kind of sealant. Okay, what that looks like is, on a ThermaTru, very specific, you cannot use silicone. Silicone caulking does not adhere to our substrates, so the sill will not adhere to this. We've gone to many jobs where that door, you pull it out and there's no adhesion whatsoever to that sill. So we do recommend OSI Quad Max. There's also other brands as well, but you want something with a polymer so that it can adhere to our subsill. So what you want to do in that case, once this is applied, you're going to go with 2 heavy beads of caulk on both ends here. So fill those 2 ends up with a heavy bead of caulk and then go across with at least a 1/4-inch bead of caulking, 3 lines going across the center. All right, now when you set that sill on top of there, it'll create a nice tight seal. So this is what typically it will look like once it's sealed and installed, okay? Again, this is the barrier method. Renovation jobs and things like that, you may not have the opportunity to use a sill pan. depending on the rough opening you have and what kind of flooring and siding even. But it's always recommended, if at all possible, to use a preformed sill pan like this. So this is the first option you have. The second option, which is the one that's recommended highly by ThermaTru, would be the sill pan, okay? This, again, comes in different sizes depending on your door and your opening, all right? It comes with a back dam, so any water that goes into that, around that unit, sits on this sill pan, is gonna drain outward and not into the house. So the way this is installed, again, what we try to do is, now you don't have to add both of these layers. It's one or the other. If you wanna add it, it won't hurt it at all. It just creates a better barrier. So this would be typically on just raw wood. The sill pan, what you're gonna do is you're gonna add caulking again, same as you did with this. Heavy beads of caulk on the two ends and going across the center with 3 beads of caulk. Once that's done, you then set your sill pan on top of that bed of caulk, and this piece goes here, all right? These sill pans specifically come with the adhesive already for PVC. And the way that gets applied is, this then gets opened, you apply some of the adhesive to both pieces, top and bottom, on both sides. That then goes on here, you press on that, takes about a good 2 minutes to fully dry. Once it's fully dried and cured, it should be one solid piece. Now, what we typically like to do, and this is not something that is necessarily told to you to do by ThermaTru, is these two seams are weak points. So you're relying on just the glue underneath there to hold that together. As we know, you're stepping on sills all the time. There is some deflection on that. So there's always a possibility of that adhesive coming loose. So what we try to do in that case is, once we apply this sill, we apply a piece of flashing tape right across the two joints. Now, we know that you've got double protection on that now. You have the adhesive that's holding the sill pan together, and you have the piece of flashing tape. So there really shouldn't be any point of entry beyond that point. The other thing we do is, again, this is not something that's typically recommended, but we like to do when we do installs.
Syrians.
Sorry about that. Okay. All right, again. So now we have this applied, we have our tape here. We're now gonna take another piece of tape and we're gonna apply it to the two ends. Okay, what this does, again, any potential voids that you may have on the ends in the center, it's gonna eliminate that. This is now completely sealed to that subsill, and it should be completely watertight. So by doing this, it should pretty much keep any water out. Any water that gets in around the unit, again, that could happen from a window above it, siding, we all know. There's many ways that the water can get infiltrated into the house. Potentially, if it's all working, it's all done properly, it'll hit that sill and actually drain outward, okay? So at this point, once this is all completed, again, we're gonna add 2 more layers of sealant on the 2 corners with the caulk gun. In this case, this is a little different. We're not going across the centers with 3 beads like we did on the other application. This is only getting 1 bead of caulk on the back dam here, okay? So 1 heavy bead of caulk on the back and the 2 ends. Now you're gonna take your door and you're gonna set it into that sill pan. All right, the reason why you're not now putting the beads of caulking across the centers, you're not creating a dam anymore or the barrier method. This is the drainage method. So this is basically just a windbreak. That's to keep any air from infiltrating into the house. So again, any water gets in around it, it'll hit that sill pan, drain outward. The caulking on the back is specifically just to keep the air out. So you're always gonna get some air underneath that sill. It'll keep it from coming into the house. Any questions on that? Okay. So this is pretty much, once this is completed and the door is installed, I have a setup here where it has a couple different options. Again, we have the drainage. You can see there's caulk lines here, and we have the barrier with the sill. This is what it will look like before the door goes in. Once the door is fully installed, then we also have to make sure that everything is flashed. you're shimmed, you're insulated around. On a unit that you don't have the ability to do any flashing, like this, typically, if you have the opportunity to either order a unit without the brick mold installed, or you can take the brick mold off, that's always the best option, because now you can add a layer of flashing against the frame and the siding, or the sheathing. In the case that you can't do that, what you want to make sure you do is you add a bead of caulk on the back of the brick mold, and make sure that brick mold is adhered to that to the sheathing. Okay, that again creates a nice seal for you and keeps it watertight. So different options to do. Again, the importance of this is, I can't speak about it enough, that these are problems that you take a couple moments, even if it's a little more expense to install the units this way, it'll save you a lot of money in the long run. When you get a leaky unit, you're talking about ripping the unit out, redoing everything, siding, trim, paint, so it gets very expensive. So if it adds, $30, $50, even $100 to the cost of the unit, it's well worth it in the long run. Just make sure that that's all done and done right. Okay, now, the other thing we're going to go over is basic install. On a ThermaTru door, any door that you're working on, it's important that you look for a couple things. You want to make sure you have a level sill, square opening, and that the unit's installed plumb, all right? So what does that look like? Typically on an install, I'll lock that. If this door is not in place and you have just the opening in this case, once the flashing and the sill pan's all in, you want to set your level on your sill, your subfloor, before the door is installed. You want to check to see what that looks like. If there's any adjustments that need to be made at that point, that's where you should be doing it. Okay, so get shims, get that sill as perfectly straight as you can before that door goes in. What happens is if you don't do these things and you don't have that perfect sill, you set that door in, problems are going to come up after the fact, and now you're pulling that back out to try to make those adjustments. So if you start with a level sill, that's key, okay? So in this case, we'll start with a level sill. We set our opening in. Now, there's different ways of doing that. Taking the door off the frame is the way we typically like to do it. It makes it easier for us just because you're not fighting that door, especially if you're dealing with a bigger door, a double door unit, where now there's a lot of moving components on that. So to try to struggle with that frame and get that frame into the opening, get it all plumb and level square, makes it a little more difficult. Again, that's an option, that's your choice of how you do it. We typically like to pull the door panels off the frame, get the frame set in the opening, plumb, level, square it, tack it in with a couple screws, then we set our door back into the frame. At that point, you're pretty much taking your levels and you're throwing them away, all right? Everything was perfect, level, plumb, and square at that point. Once you set that door in, things may change a bit. So that's where you have to make your adjustments. And what you really want to look for is your reveal around your door edge and your frame. Typically, you should have a pretty even reveal all the way across, top, bottom, and sides. If you don't have that even reveal, that's where you need to make your adjustments with your shims and your screws, okay? So once the door is back in, we look for our reveal and we make our adjustments. That may actually throw your frame out of square, which is technically not the right way to do it, but it's building. You're dealing with a house, walls that are not perfect. There's a lot of components that are not perfectly straight and level. So you have to adjust your door to accommodate for what your opening looks like. If you just put your door in to fit that opening, and that opening's at a plumb or at a square, it's going to show up on your door. Now, typically what I like to do is explain a double door. So you have a double door, you'll put a level on your door here, and it shows that the top is out 1/8 of an inch. Doesn't seem like much, right? Then you go on the other side, and you're 1/8 of an inch opposite of this side. So this side is out 1/8, and this side is in 1/8. In the center of a double door, that's going to show up 1/4 of an inch. So that's a lot, all right? And not just a double door, but even a single door. Same goes for it being at a square. A lot of guys think that my bubble's in between the lines, and that's okay, it's acceptable. It's really not. You have to make sure that it's now, door's at a plumb, 1/8 of an inch outside of the house, and this one's at a plumb outside of the house as well, 1/8 of an inch. Then you may have a fighting chance with that, because at least they're out the same way. If they're out opposite of each other, that's where it becomes a problem. Any questions so far? Okay. So in this case, we have a level sill. We're now checking for our square, okay? That goes by checking both sides. and then we check for our plumb, which is on here. All right, now typically what we do is on the hinge side, we get this as straight as we possibly can, and we add some fasteners to hold that frame in place. Once that's in place, we come to the strike side and we do the same, and we get that as even as we can with the hinge side. Once they're pretty much just about the same, that's when we put our fasteners in. Now what I do is we'll put 2 fasteners, one top, one bottom, same on this side, and that's just typically to hold everything kind of straight until you set your door in place and make sure everything's functioning properly. Once your door is in and it's working properly, everything seems to lock and it's adjusted the way it should be, then you can go ahead and put the rest of your fasteners. On a 6/8 door, you need to put 6 fasteners. That's 3 fasteners on the hinge side, 3 fasteners on the strike side. I can't tell you how important that is because it's basically, what happens is I've seen many doors, they'll put a fastener top and bottom, nothing in the center. This is composite material. This will move. Okay, we've seen some of these things move 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch off the wall. So it will bow and actually pull that trim right off the wall. So it's important that this is fastened in 3 points. If you have an 8-foot door, it's got to be fastened at 4 points. So 4 points on the strike side and at every hinge as well. Now, fastening also requires shimming. You can't just fasten the door and not shim behind it because now there's really no structure behind it. There's nothing holding that tight to that opener. So these are all the parts and steps and pieces that needs to be done to have this installed the correct way. So now we have our doors installed. It's level, it's square. Our fasteners are in place and our shims are in place. We set our door back onto the hinges, we shut it, it works, and that's typically a full install. Everything should work at that point, and you go ahead and trim it. Insulate and trim. We are now offering with our pre-finished products a Cortex fastener. Now we get this question pretty often where we were always supplying a trim head screw with our pre-finished units. All right, so a trim head screw, very small headed screw that would leave a very small hole and you can fill it most of the time and make it go away. Great product, but you still had a hole that you had to fill, you had to paint, and that became a problem. So now we're actually offering a Cortex fastener, which is basically this screw here, and we have plugs that actually cover that hole that are color matched to the unit. A lot of guys use this for decking and stuff like that, which is great, but now we're offering for our products. So you would install this, and it comes with the screws. It should be enough screws for every door, and it comes with the bit as well and the plugs. So that goes in until it stops itself. Once it's completely in, it countersinks it, and the plug goes into place. You get a rubber mallet and just tap it in. That leaves you a nice finish on there. No screw holes. Now on a single door or a double door, typically you can go behind the weather stripping and cover those screw heads. When you have a sidelight unit, it's not as easy. There's nothing to really conceal those screws. So it's something that you probably want to get that upgrade, get those fasteners so that it can conceal those screw heads and it won't be as noticeable. It's actually a big complaint that we get from customers. Some guys will use a massive screw in there. It's not the right way to go. It's a finished product. You want to make it look nice. So that's just an option that we're providing now. So you would get basically this package here, which offers instructions, the plugs, the screws, and the bit as well. So something to look for if you're ordering a unit pre-finished from Kuiken. Tell them, hey, I want some Cortex fasteners to go with it. This way it'll be a nice clean look for your customer. Any questions? Sorry. Yes, these pans have a slight pitch to them. Some have more of a pitch than others depending on the brand you use, and some are also a lot thicker. So depending on what application you're using it on is something to take into consideration, because if it's a very tight opening, this can affect that. It'll make that unit fit very tight in that opening. So if the opening is a typical opening where it should be, most pans will work for that. This is a pretty thin gauge, but there are other brands that have a much thicker gauge, so it's just something to keep in mind. But they are a pitch, they do have a slight pitch to them so that the water drains outward. Some have more of a pitch than others. Okay, so another thing I like to talk about is all our doors come with an installation package, okay? What that looks like is this here. Our pre-finished units will come with this package, okay, which also has a touch-up marker. So if there's any scrapes or scratches during the install, you can touch it up. This stuff is usually stapled to the side jamb. It gets lost a lot. It gets ripped off. Workers will take it, not know what it is, thinking instructions. I know how to install a door, I don't need it. Throw it to the side. But there's a couple things that are in here that are very crucial to the install of the door. One of them is the installation screws that I showed you before that you would need for this. There's also security screws. So the purpose of a security screw is on our doors, there'll be 2 holes here that are left empty. Those holes are basically for your security screws. It's important that you put those in there. That holds the weight of that door. These doors, by nature, they're going to want to sag. They're heavy, especially depending on the glass you have. So those screws will actually, they're long enough to go through the frame and into your studding behind it, and it just helps hold the weight of that door and keep that door operational and square for you. So there's always 2 sets of screws in here, depending on the hinges that you have, with 2 different size heads. Very important that you put those in. If you lose them, you can't get them from your dealer quick enough, put something else in there. Just get a screw that fits it and make sure that those holes are filled and the screws are in place. We go to many jobs that, our guys will go out there, put 2 screws, walk away, and they're done. And it was just the fact that they forgot to put them in. All right? The other part that you find in this is corner pads. These things, a lot of people tend to leave these out, throw them out, and not know what they're for. This will save you a lot of headache if you put them in and you put them in correctly. This little pad is basically just to keep water from coming into the house. So on a door jamb, you have your adjustable sill, you have your jamb. You have your weather stripping that comes down this end here. That weather stripping has to end at some point, which is typically at the sill. At that point, that's always an area for water and air to infiltrate into the house. This piece of foam here gets applied there, and this is actually what keeps that from happening. So in this case, as you can see, this one was already applied. So your weather strip goes in, and you'll find a lot of times that when you get a door from us, the weather strip may be bunched up in the corner here, okay? What you want to do is you want to kind of trim that at an angle. So either leave it in place and trim it, or you can pull it out and just kind of give it a cut there at an angle. So what that does, that'll keep it from bunching up in the corner there. It'll give you a nice straight weather strip, the way it should be. Now this is on both sides, the strike side and the hinge side. Once that's done, that's where your corner pads come in place. Now, for those of you that have done doors for years, you may remember these things used to be kind of just square. Okay, now they're shaped like a 7. And there's a thin side and a thicker side. The way these go on is, in this case, you have a left and a right. It goes into the weather strip. You want to run a bead of caulk at the bottom. So once your sill cap is adjusted, all right, and we'll show you what that looks like. These sill caps are adjusted. If you got a door that's either too tight to open and close and is rubbing hard, or if you have one that's just opening and closing very freely, that will allow air in. So what you want to do is kind of get on your hands and knees, look underneath the door, make sure that sill cap is adjusted either up or down to where it's making contact. A great way to test that is you put a dollar bill on the sill, shut the door, pull the dollar bill out. You should have some resistance, not too much, not too little. So that's a good way to test that sill and make sure that's adjusted properly. Once you've got that adjusted to where you need it, that's when you add the corner pad. So run a bead of caulk right at the bottom of the corner pad where it meets that sill cap, and then the corner pad then goes on top of that, okay? So you want that to sit on top of that caulk. The reason for that is this here will wick up water, so any moisture that gets in there will wick up into the pad, and eventually the pad will just break and fall apart. So that's what that does, also creates more of a seal as well. So this piece here, like I said, we go to many jobs where they just don't apply them, they don't know what they're for, or they put them in the wrong way. If it's put in incorrectly, it won't serve its purpose either. So We've got so many jobs, they're leaking doors, they're getting water coming in the corners, especially in the shore application. You put a corner pad and some caulk, we walk away and the problem's done. So, very important piece to your install. Any questions on that? Okay. So the other product we have is our panel lock. So this product came out not too long ago. Well, it's been out for a while. We just started adding it. We added it to our product, the Panel Lock Plus. Some of you may have seen this already. We're offering it with our refinish, but also our unfinished product. What this does, this allows you to use, you have the ability to have a multi-point lock and use your standard lock with it. So in the past, with ThermaTru specifically, if you bought a multi-point lock, you would have to buy their hardware that was specific to that lock. You had a couple options, but not as many. With this product, you can use the panel lock. You have the multi-point function on it, but now you can use it with your lock. Your MTech, not MTech, well, MTech, your Schlage, your ball, whatever they may be. But it's also, you have to make sure when buying these that you get with your salesperson at Kuiken and you ask them, say, hey, this is the lock I'm looking to get for this panel lock that is compatible. Because not every lock is compatible. The other option is also you get to use a keyless entry. Okay, and that's really the big selling point on this. You get a multi-point lock that you can use with a keyless entry where you weren't able to do before. Okay, we all know that that's getting very popular now. Everybody's got keyless entries. To use this lock, again, make sure the lock that you're going to be using is compatible. You can go on the Endura website and see if a lock, again, is compatible. You can get with your sales rep at Kuiken and see if they can help you through that process. Most of you, I'm sure, buy your doors and buy your hardware along as a package deal, so they can help you through that process and make sure that it is compatible. When putting these on, it's not like your typical lock installation. There's other parts and pieces and components that play a big part in this. So when you get a panel lock or door from us with a panel lock, it's going to come with an adapter kit. So it's this plastic box here with a bunch of parts and pieces. There is a QR code on there that you want to scan. This gives you all the instructions on how to install it. It won't take you to the compatibility list, but that is something that you can find on Endura's website. And the Endura name is on here as well. So you can go on the website and make sure that the lock you're using is going to be compatible with this lock. Okay? And that's important because you don't want to buy a lock and now you have a house that's not secure, it's not working. So just make sure that when you're buying your lock, your door, and a lock to go with it, that they're going to be compatible. Okay? When putting these in, these locks have two parts to it. There's one face, if you look in the board here, there's a plastic composite edge on that. The other side is going to be a metal face on it. That's the reason why I'm mentioning that's actually an important part. These adapters can only go in one way. All right? They could only go in through the plastic composite side. If you try putting it through the metal side, it's not going to function the way it's supposed to. All right, so that's key to putting these in. Again, these are lots of parts and pieces. Could get a little complicated. Just make sure that you go on the website, you get the instructions, make sure you're using the right ones. You will find in some cases you'll have some that look like they fit and they work, and you'll find that after you put it all together that it doesn't work right. Some will require multiple pieces. Oops. Some require multiple pieces, so you'll have two parts that go into the bottom, one piece that goes into the top, depending on what that looks like and the lock that you're using. So just make sure that you get the instructions, you go into the website and see what it is that you need to get this lock to work right. But again, great product. These are universal. If you happen to come across one on your door that your latch here is orientated the wrong way, you don't have to return the door and pull it out of the opening. That can be fixed. These are actually universal. There's a set screw in here. Loosen that set screw, pull that out, turn it, put it back in, and lock it back in place. So, again, good product. People are liking it. A lot of people do want that multi-point feature, but they also want to use their lock. They don't want to have to be, they don't want to have to use a lock that's proprietary to this actual lock system. So it's important that you just, again, make sure it's the right lock that is going to work for what you need.